Hi, this is Randal Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Randi Harper joins me. We're going to talk about synergy, which lets you use the same mouse and keyboard across multiple computers on your desk. You're going to want to see this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Floss Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Floss Weekly with Randal Schwartz and Randi Harper, episode 178 for August 17th, 2011, Synergy. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open-source software. I am your host, Randal Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you all sorts of projects, big projects, little projects, projects that were started by a single person, projects that were started by an entire team of people, projects that were originally proprietary and now are open source. Let's see, have I covered all the categories? Maybe I have. It's hard to tell. But I love doing this show because I get to talk to such really great and cool people. We have a really great show planned for you today, but before I do that, one thing first is that, again, I'm coming to you from somewhere in a deep, secret underground bunker by a very large hosting service, whose name I won't mention on the audio, but you just saw it on the video. And I'm glad, again, for them to be providing a space for me to do this show each week when I'm down here on site for them. But before I do any more, let's go ahead and bring on our co-host, Randi Harper. Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be here.
Very good. And, of course, a lot of people might know you by your other handle, FreeBSD Girl, so I'll have to say that at least once here as well.
That's right. FreeBSD Girl on Twitter.
Very good, very good. So we have a really great show planned for today. We have Chris Schoeneman, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is going to come to talk to us about synergy, which is, as I've been prepping for the show here, I see that it's about being able to use my keyboard and my mouse on my machine, automatically sort of transparently, I guess, to other machines that are also sitting on my desk. I mean, we have a lot of situations these days where you have to have a Windows machine and you have to have a Linux machine, or you want a Linux machine, and maybe you also have an OS X machine, and they're all sitting next to each other, and you don't want to have like 3 sets of keyboards and mice because maybe you don't have enough room there on your screen. And actually, Randi, I understand you have some experience with the Synergy product. Can you tell us what it's like to use it and what it's about?
Oh, yeah. I've been using it since, I think, about 2003, mostly for gaming. It just kind of lets you use one mouse, one keyboard, going between multiple computers, and like you were saying. So it's really awesome for that. Great for gaming. I use it at work. I don't think I could live without it at this point. I've been using it for that long.
Well, it sounds really essential. I'm glad we've got the person on who's going to be able to tell us most about that. But before we bring him on, I have a little bit I have to say because we have a sponsor this week for our show. I always love it when we've got sponsors. This week, we have this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Netflix. Netflix streams thousands of TV episodes and movies directly to you instantly, which means you save time, money, and hassle. There are several easy ways to instantly access streaming movies and TV shows with Netflix. You can watch Netflix movies and TV shows on your Mac or PC or iPad. And I actually use this because I watch these shows on my laptop while I'm sitting in a hotel room somewhere. I hardly ever turn the TV on anymore. I just simply use Netflix for everything. You can watch on your iPhone and some Android phones too. And I have it on my iPhone. It works really well. If I'm sitting on a public transportation somewhere, I can pull up an actual TV show and watch it while I'm coming along. If you have a gaming console, an Xbox 360, a PS3, or Nintendo Wii, you can watch Netflix right on your TV. I have the PS3. Comes through in beautiful 1080p. Very beautiful images there. And if you're not a gamer, you can watch Netflix on your TV with an Apple TV box or a Roku box. They're inexpensive and easy to use. I have the previous generation Roku. I've just ordered the new Roku, and hopefully it's going to be nice full 1080p there as well. So with Netflix, you can watch movies and TV shows instantly using any of these devices, and you can begin watching a movie or show on one device, then finish on a different one. Whichever way you choose to access Netflix, you can watch as many movies and TV shows as you want, anytime you want, and you could cancel anytime. So try Netflix today for 30 days for free. If you go to netflix.com/twit, T-W-I-T, that lets them know that you came listening to us. Be sure to use this URL when you sign up for your free trial, netflix.com/twit. We thank Netflix for their support of Twit and Floss Weekly, and we hope to enjoy you. We hope you enjoy watching instantly with Netflix. And besides the flub, I hope they appreciate us plugging them as well. But let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Well, hi. Glad to be here.
Great. And I gave probably a pretty poor representation of synergy at the opening of the show, but let's back up just a step and say, what problem are you solving with synergy and how does it do it?
Well, let's say you have two computers on your desk and you've got two keyboards and two mice. That takes up a lot of room, kind of inconvenient. So the synergy is software to eliminate one of your keyboard and mice. You start synergy on both computers and configure them appropriately. And then the mouse on one computer can just be moved from one screen over to the other. And when it's on the other computer screen, you can also use the keyboard and type, and all your input goes over to that second computer. You can also share the clipboards between the computers.
That actually sounds rather magical. How does that work?
It is kind of fun when you use it for the first time. You really go, wow, that works. It's just simple networking. Both computers are running a version of Synergy, and they communicate through TCP. Mm-hmm. And on the machine where you have the keyboard and mouse, it watches the mouse to see when it reaches the edge of a screen. And when it does that, it grabs the mouse and then watches the input and sends that input over to the other computer. And it also grabs the keyboard and sends all the input over to the other computer as well.
So is this sort of like VNCing into a machine, or how is it different?
Yeah, it's very similar to VNC, except it is not transferring video. So it is not for remote use, but it's for where you have multiple computers on one desk. So in a sense, a subset.
Okay, so let's say I have both a Mac and a Linux box sitting next to each other on my desktop then, well, my desk, not the desktop, that would be hard, but like on my desk. So I would install this on my Mac as my primary keyboard, and I would also install it over on the Linux box. Now, I'd have to have a keyboard and mouse there anyway to kind of get it up and running and launched.
Get it up and running, yeah.
Okay.
Or unless you SSH'd over there to do it.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you could actually fire this up even via an SSH connection then?
Yeah, there are certain limitations with that. Interesting, some security things. Like on the Mac OS, if you SSH over there and try to start Synergy, it will say, well, you're not actually part of the desktop, so I won't let you look at the clipboard. So you have to kind of, there's a little game you can play with that. On the first setup anyway. You can SSH over there, start up Synergy, and it will let you control the keyboard and mouse. So once you've started Synergy that way and you can't get the clipboard, you use Synergy to go over to the Mac, assuming it's the slave, and you start Synergy again directly in a terminal on the Mac, or you launch the app, and that, since it's launched actually from the desktop, can see the clipboard. So then you kill the original Synergy and you have a fully functional one. But you can also set it up to auto start, so you don't have to do it every time.
Now, also let me understand this. So with clipboard, you mean that, for example, I would use cut and paste within a machine, but you're saying I can also cut on one machine and paste on another, and it still works?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I know that my Mac clipboard has all sorts of rich media possibilities. Does that also transfer over, or just the text part of that?
We have a limited support for rich media. It will take HTML, and there's some preliminary support for images, but mostly text. There's also, of course, transfer time. So if you copy something very large, when you move over to the other screen, there'll be a delay. A bug we're working on to avoid that little pop. Mm-hmm. But for most clipboard stuff, it's just great. You just double click on your Linux box, move over to the Mac, and there it is. Command V, and you got it.
So you mentioned security just a second ago when you were talking about starting it over SSH. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, has security been a big concern?
That is what I was saying there is OS 10 actually has this feature that if you SSH to the Mac and you try to interact with certain features associated with the desktop, like the clipboard, the operating system itself will reject that and will say this process doesn't have access to the clipboard. In a larger sense, though, the security, definitely there's issues for security. If you're doing this at home, well, no big deal really. But if you're doing it in a larger network, or for whatever reason your connection is going through the internet, again, since Synergy is really for stuff on your desk, that's unusual. But Synergy doesn't do any encryption, and if you use Synergy to log into something on another computer, well, it's sending your keystrokes in the clear. So it would be very easy to snoop your passwords that way. You can run Synergy through a SSH tunnel, so that's one way to deal with that. And we are looking at adding encryption directly into Synergy, so it's just automatic.
So I've been using Synergy for years now, and I know there's been Synergy and there's been Synergy Plus. Are these two separate projects? I mean, what's going on with that?
Yeah, they were originally. I had things come up in life that just I was busy, and I didn't have a lot of time to work on Synergy. I had also tried working on a version 2.0 and I didn't finish that, and that didn't go anywhere. So there was this long delay or period in the Synergy development where nothing was really happening. So there were other forks that started up and started making fixes and adding new features. One of those is Synergy Plus, and Synergy Plus have now merged back together, and it's just a single project again. There is another version of Synergy, a fork for the Mac, that added a nice Cocoa interface to it, and that's something we hope to pull in as well into the main Synergy project now.
How many active contributors does Synergy have?
I'm not entirely sure of that. We have several dozen people on the developer mailing list. There are a few active developers who are like core members, and we do get patches from lots of people. So not exactly sure of the total number.
Before, when I downloaded it, I noticed it was on Google Code, and that seems to have changed. Is there a reason you moved away from that?
Did we move from Google Code? We were on SourceForge, and we moved, and we've moved over to something else.
Yeah, there's a project on Google Code currently for Synergy, but it points now to the new Synergy page.
Oh, the Synergy, FOSS.org? Yeah. The source code, I think, is still hosted on Synergy Code, but the website is hosted separately. We just wanted more control and more flexibility. One of the developers wanted to use Redmine for that, and because he was familiar with it. I looked at it, and I thought it looked good as well. I originally had Synergy on SourceForge. It started many years ago. SourceForge was kind of the place to be. And I wasn't really all that thrilled with SourceForge. I didn't much like the bug tracking. Also found it surprisingly sluggish sometimes. And this other developer, Nick, I guess wasn't all that happy with the flexibility he had at Google Code. So we moved it to someplace new where we had full control.
How did you start Synergy? What was the problem? I mean, where were you at? And obviously a place with limited desktop space. I think that's probably the easiest way to say that. But where were you at, and why did you think of Synergy, and how did you come up with the solutions?
Well, the very first implementation of Synergy was when I was at Silicon Graphics, and I wasn't the original author, actually. A couple of other guys in our group were well, we had this problem of we had a Silicon Graphics box, and it was Silicon Graphics at the time, not SGI, and we also had PCs. We were in the Cosmos software group, and we were writing software for Windows, and so we had these two boxes, and they were going to go buy KVMs for everybody. And they had actually gotten the KVM and tried it out, and it burnt out somebody's motherboard or something. Obviously, it wasn't the best KVM switch. So he said, well, here, let me just give this a try. He whipped up something really quick. And I don't know, guess it just came to him, hey, well, TCP networking, sure, this is easy. I've done this sort of thing before. We hadn't done event capturing and synthesis, but the APIs were there. There was also X to X, which we were all familiar with, but since Windows wasn't running X, he said, okay, we'll do the same thing, but for Windows. And then I contributed to that project. And Silicon Graphics, well, it kind of leaked out from our group through other parts of Silicon Graphics where people had PCs, and then outside of Silicon Graphics, and it was just this huge hit. People loved this program. And Silicon Graphics, though, wasn't interested in making it official software. You know, it's a business. They've got their core business, and they didn't want to bother with that. So a good deal later, I thought, you know what? That was a fun program. Why don't I write that open source outside of SGI? And I guess I don't think we even checked with SGI that it would be okay because, well, they had their own problems. And it's a rewrite from scratch anyway.
What's the time frame of that, actually? Because I did a lot of Perl training at SGI in the late 90s.
Okay. It was 1996, the end of 1996.
Wow. So that's odd. I may have actually bumped into you in the cafeteria at some point there then, because I was spending probably you probably didn't take any Perl training from me, or else I probably would have recognized you a little better. But
nope.
But I was working probably at SGI about every 6 to 8 weeks in that time frame. So got real familiar with the cafeteria, and I got to go back and visit at Google, which is now the people that own the buildings. Right. And it was so weird going back and going, I ate there before, and the place where I gave my Google Tech Talk on Git, in fact, was within 50 feet of where I had been training in Perl, a decade and a half earlier.
Yeah, small world.
Definitely is. Definitely.
I remember SGI, they had just built those buildings, and then it was only a couple of years, basically, before they had to sell them. Yeah, but they were cool buildings.
Yeah. So this idea of first moving the mouse and keyboard between two machines, you said was initially a Windows machine and X11 and running on an SGI. And you mentioned this thing X to X. I'm not familiar with that. Was that something that's just X11? Similar thing to do, though? It
is. And it's a particularly simple program because when it's X, it just opens two display connections. And one computer, again, grabs the mouse and keyboard and then just sends events over to the other display. I don't recall if it uses the X-test extension like Synergy does to synthesize events, or if it just used X-send event. But that program's been around for quite some time.
Cool.
Since before 1996, anyway.
And so this thing that you're talking about that got created to do this initial layout, is that, I saw the name Cosmos Synergy at some point. Is that what you're talking about for that?
That's right, yeah. So the group we were in is called Cosmos Software. The three of us were working on Cosmo Worlds, which was a 3D modeler for VRML. And so one of the other two guys came up with the name Synergy, and then we just stuck Cosmo in front of it because everything was called Cosmo something in that department. So you originally wrote this from scratch then as an open source project separate from that. Did you have collaborators at that point, or did you bring them in later? No, it was just me back then. I did contact the other two guys about it, and they were like, well, you just go ahead and do that. You have fun with that. And originally it was the same thing, Windows and X11 only? Yes, that's right. And then the Mac came on a little later, a platform I wasn't familiar with at the time. And what are some of the complexities about being able to do it across all three platforms? Yeah. Oh, the system, as you might imagine, there's no common API for event capturing and synthesis. That's all very esoteric, really, and specific to the platforms. So that's one of the hard problems. On the other hand, the networking is all the same. It's all just the typical TCP Unix APIs, even on Windows.
And just to clarify for our audience, X11 events, that's like mouse down, mouse up, mouse moves a little bit one way or the other, mouse hits the edge of a screen. Something like, is that like what you're talking about?
Yes. So on the X side, if you're listening for these events, you'll just look for keyboard events, X key press, or button events, X button press, button release, and X mouse move. And there's an extension on X test, that lets you synthesize those events. So when you're being driven by another computer and you receive those events over the network, you call the X test functions to generate those events. And as far as X can tell, they're from the user. There's really no distinguishing characteristics to those events when sent by X test. On Windows, there are similar things. You'll get the message that key was pressed and so on. And Windows also has its own APIs for generating the events. Those have changed over time. There's been at least 2 sets of different ways to synthesize events. And on the Mac, again, you listen for events the normal way. And the Mac has had a few APIs for synthesizing events. And I think in OS 10.5, I think it was, or maybe it was 5. They radically changed all the event synthesis stuff. Some really interesting new API that Synergy doesn't yet take advantage of, but looks really interesting.
But that may also be because 10.5, I think, introduced the built-in VNC client where they didn't have that before, so maybe they were changing the way they're doing APIs for that.
That might be the case. That's a good point, yeah. It's an interesting thing about you can insert hooks in several different places in the event chain, and you can add events from any hook that you insert. You can inject events, and you can grab events from any hook that you insert. And they have places where you can put the hooks that are very low level or very high level. And I think it's also intended to be a way to do input methods. So you can have your own input method apps that grab keyboard events and say, oh, looks like you're typing katana or something, and generate Japanese characters.
And how does it handle, I'm particularly concerned about this since I'm OS 10, how does it handle the differences between the single button mouse and the 3-button mice as we go from one place to the other?
Well, the Mac actually does support multiple button mice.
Yes.
And so if you were generating events on a Linux box with a 3-button mouse, we'll send the events over, Synergy will send the event over with which button it was. And on the Mac, it'll generate the event as if it's from that button. Even if your Mac doesn't have a mouse with that many buttons, that still works. So you can right-click on the Linux box, and it will actually pop up a menu on the Mac, even if you only have a 1-button mouse.
It does the equivalent of what we do when we command click or control click then, because those are actually the 2nd and 3rd button equivalents.
That's right. Yeah.
Cool.
But middle mouse clicking won't paste. The Mac doesn't have that as a feature. Right.
Command V or whatever. So we have to figure out how to. How do you get a command key through then? Is that like the meta key on Linux?
There's actually you can change the mapping, but
okay.
Yeah, it says the shift and the control keys are fine. The Alt key becomes the command key, and the Windows key or meta becomes the Alt key. And you might wonder, well, why doesn't the Alt key go to the Alt key? And you can remap it that way if you want to, but I did it that way because physically on the keyboards, that's where the keys match. So the command key is where the Alt key is.
And I just see in the chat room, because we do have a live chat room that goes on while we're taping the show. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. I do see that someone says that they've got it going across 5 machines. Is that anywhere near the record, or have you seen it go even further?
I know of going to 6. I think I've seen 7, which I think was on a YouTube video. Someone said, "Hey, look at my Synergy setup," and showed me and showed their 7 computers. Synergy doesn't have any built-in limit, but there are of course practical limits because every computer has to have its own monitor because it doesn't transfer video. So you can only fit so many monitors on your desk.
That'd be cool to set up like a Brady Bunch style, not 3x3 grid,
yeah.
and take the mouse and just drag it all around. Can you drag windows too, or that? I guess you're not.
No.
Can't really do that.
Yeah, every computer is just running its own operating system. It doesn't transfer any video, and you certainly can't drag a window from one computer to another. That would be very cool.
Okay. Oh, somebody else in the chat room says they got 6 going on, so they're catching up with the record there. So now we're going to have this duking out wars.
Come up to,
yeah. So I can install this on now. There's a distinction between client and server, right? So I have one that's the server, and the rest are all sort of phoning home into the server.
That's right. Yeah, the server is the one that has the actual keyboard and mouse, and the clients all connect to that and receive data from the server, which is kind of why I called it the server. It's where you get your data from. There's always this debate. I think the other machine should be called the server, and the one driving the mouse and keyboard should be called the client. But sort of a...
Well, that does actually fit the X11 paradigm, though, which is that the thing that actually has the display is always called the server, which always confused the heck out of people that were trying to look at it from the other direction.
That's right. Yeah, so it's kind of an ongoing argument. It's sort of pointless. I think maybe in the future we'll just call them master and slave. And there's also talk about maybe changing it so that all the computers can generate input. So whichever keyboard or mouse you use most recently, that's the keyboard and mouse you're driving things with. Now, of course, in that case, you would actually have to have multiple keyboards and mice on your desk still. Which was kind of the point originally, is to eliminate that. But a lot of people have asked for that feature. It's like, well, I've got a laptop, and it has a keyboard, and I can't get rid of it. And it would be nice if I went over there and typed on it that it did what I thought it should do.
Wow.
You do get this sometimes. If you do have the keyboard on your desk and you go over there and you start typing and it doesn't do any, it doesn't work. You're like, wait, what's going on? And then you realize, oh, wait, that's not my server keyboard.
So there's been some talk on IRC about different devices that might be supported. And one of the users wanted to know if you support tablets currently, like the Wacom tablet, or Wacom tablets, rather.
Yeah, the tablets aren't fully supported, or aren't really supported. That shouldn't be that difficult. It just hasn't been high on the list. And the main difference, of course, between a tablet and a mouse is the tablet is an absolute positioning system, and Synergy captures events, mouse events, as deltas. And it would have to simply realize, oh, this is a tablet, this is an absolute input device, and change how it captures that input. So that hasn't been done yet. Well, I know there's some work in progress on that, and there's also support for preliminary support for tablet devices, at least as clients.
Okay. Synergy is really popular in the gaming scene, which I'm a part of, due to what we call multi-boxing, which involves running the same game client on multiple computers and controlling them with the same mouse and keyboard. This works awesome, but there's been some requests for things like gamepad, and people wanted to know if something like that would work.
There's work going on for additional input devices. Every platform has different APIs for querying the devices and receiving the input from it. And then, of course, you need to be able to synthesize events as if it's from a game device. So that's also kind of on the list of things to do. And it's just been, a matter of programming time and APIs. It's been difficult to find, like on X, how to synthesize events that aren't from the mouse and keyboard. The X-Test extension doesn't support just arbitrary input devices. So, in fact, I'm not even sure how we'll do that.
Have there been any thoughts about getting this working with, say, GPM or Mouse D or something like that? I mean, outside of the X environment on Unix?
That has been requested. I think it's just, again, it's one of those things that kind of falls down farther on the list. It would be really great to be able to do this in a text environment, in a virtual console. Another thing that's been asked for is support over not Ethernet, but a serial line. And that comes in handy for some dumb terminals, but also, which would generally be text as well. It's also would be very useful in a way. IT people will hate this, but when people run a VPN, that always shuts down all your Ethernet devices, all your network devices, except the VPN. So if you're using Synergy at home between two computers and you VPN into work, now you can't use Synergy between your two computers. So if Synergy could support communication over, I don't know, a USB connection or something, then there'd be this back door that Synergy could continue to communicate, despite the fact that the network was shut down. And of course, VPN shuts off those other connections so that you're not leaking private information out through some misconfigured network, which is why I think IT people wouldn't be too happy about it. But at least it would be quite limited. It would just be Synergy talking to another Synergy. At least that's what you'd say, to hope that they would allow you to do that.
It sounds like you've got a lot of awesome ideas and where you want the project to go and so much stuff to work on. Are you looking for more developers to help out with this?
Oh, it would be great. I mean, we'd love more people to come on. There's currently a lively discussion going on about a version 2.0 and a well-defined protocol for that version 2.0. The protocol, of course, can be discovered if you look at the code, but it's not really written down anywhere. And we'd like to make a sort of an official Synergy protocol as a starting point. And we've got lots of ideas flying back and forth about what that should support and what's going to go into version 2.0 and whenever that's going to start, which I think is going to be starting early next year, perhaps. In the meantime, we're fixing bugs in the current version and just getting these final releases out. So developers and patches are always welcome.
If someone wanted to get involved and help out, what kind of stuff would they need to know? I mean, what expertise would they need?
Well, there are lots of different areas that Synergy touches on. If you know networking, that's certainly something useful. If you have a good knowledge of how to code user interface on each of the machines, that would also be nice. Synergy's historically suffered from a not great interface, and there was one I wrote for Windows, but I didn't write one for Linux or for the Mac, and that's just editing a text file to configure on those systems. And you can use something like Qt to run on all those machines, or some other kind of UI library that runs cross-platform, but it's never as nice as a native interface. So that's a great area. The event key capture and synthesis is sort of esoteric, but if you know that, that's great. We could definitely use your help there. We need help with documentation and testing, and it would be nice to have Synergy scriptable through Python or other languages. So that would be, if you know anything about that, that's also very helpful.
Speaking of testing, on your software requirements page, the only Linux you list as fully supported is Ubuntu. Is there really that much of a difference between Linuxes, given that it's just X11?
No. It pretty much runs on any Linux. The only problems we've had over time is GCC changes, and the code doesn't compile cleanly, or what have you like that. You also need to have the Xtext extension installed, which so you have to know how to install that stuff, and the development tools on whatever operating system you're using. But it's pretty much just straight up C++ X11 code, and it compiles on anything. It also compiles on Silicon Graphics machines, or when they existed, Sun machines for the same thing. Hewlett Packard, IBM workstations, pretty much any Unix box.
Cool. I saw as I was pawing through the wiki for Synergy that it runs on iOS, on the iPhone operating system. What does it do there? Is it do I drag my mouse onto my phone?
Yeah, that's something pretty new, and I haven't even tried it yet. So, and I mean, I have an iPad, and I really should get it and give it a shot. But yeah, I think it's a way to control that, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I'm not sure exactly how it does that.
That would be cool as a 9x9 wall display to have 9 iPads up there, and your mouse just slides up and starts running different things on each of the iPads.
Yeah, I wonder how we're going to handle things like these touch devices. It's now you don't have one cursor. You've got I guess up to 10.
Yep.
And clicking doesn't exist, sort of. It's touching. So it's unclear. Yeah, how do you map these things? What if I have an iPad as a client? How do I translate my mouse into that? Or do it the other way? If I'm touching, how do I convert all these touches onto a mouse on a desktop machine?
Well, I think Lion is going to have some sort of API for that, since it's merging closer and closer to iOS. So I imagine there's going to be a multi-touch API call coming the other direction.
Yeah, it's almost certainly going to show up there, and it's always nice to have these large companies solve our problems for us. So hopefully Apple will come up with something great, and we'll say, yes, that's a great idea, we'll use that. There was another historical problem with the mouse wheel. That's another thing that just doesn't map the same between different systems. Between Windows and Linux, it's roughly the same. On Linux, it actually maps to button presses, buttons 4 and 5. On Windows, it maps to a special wheel event, which has, when you click, one click up, you get an event that says, I've changed by 120, some arbitrary number that Microsoft chose. But it never goes by anything less than that. For whatever reason, they didn't add support for smaller increments. Clearly, it's capable of doing that, because anything between 0 and 120 would be a smaller amount. But they didn't take advantage of that. So it mapped to Linux very nicely. It's just plus 120 or minus 120, or click button 4 or click button 5. On the Mac, though, it does support small increments, and especially the Mighty Mouse. And then, so mapping the mouse wheel from Linux, say, to the Mac turns out to be pretty tricky. The Mac also does acceleration on that wheel, and you have to sort of undo the acceleration to figure out how to transfer. So there are all sorts of little niggly details like that with Synergy.
So I guess it probably fully supports the trackpad because it's emulating the mouse, but also the trackpad has multi-key events now on modern laptops.
I'm sorry, and you dropped out just a little bit.
Yeah.
There.
Okay. So the trackpad now has multiple press events on modern laptops, and also on the external trackpad you can buy. Are you translating those yet, or just ignoring those?
Right now, I believe we're getting them as whatever the operating system converts them to. So on a Mac, on the trackpad, if you tap with 2 fingers, it's like you did a right mouse click. And that's how we receive it in Synergy. So we send it across as a right mouse click.
Well, of course, because that's you have to interpret it somehow all the way down at some point. But I imagine things like the 4-finger swipe, you're probably not even seeing those.
I don't think we're seeing those yet. All right, that would be a different kind of event. So yeah, it's sort of we have to catch up and add support for all the things that they keep adding.
Okay, and now for something completely different. I was noticing in the stuff you sent me that you actually have something to do with one of the projects we talked about way back in 2009 on show number 78, twit.floss/78. We talked to Sean Morrison about BZ Flag, but you also have something to do with that. What was your participation in BZ Flag?
My participation was that I created it. Yeah, I wrote BZ Flag. I did that in grad school. and that was back in '93. Yeah. I was writing we had Hewlett-Packard workstations on our desks. This was the computer graphics lab at Cornell, and HP was very generous and would give us these machines or sell them for very little. I think they were donated, and I was surprised when I arrived at the program just how little all the other students were using the 3D graphics capabilities of these workstations. Now, to a large extent, they were doing things like radiosity and ray tracing, and didn't, well, ray tracing anyway, you wouldn't need 3D graphics hardware, but for radiosity, you could certainly use it for, interaction. And it turned out that the reason was that HP's graphics language called Starbase Starbase was difficult to use, to say the least. So with another student, we wrote a library on top of that was much more like IrisGL, SGI's library. And that was a very successful project. Students started using that and writing a whole lot more interactive graphic software. I wanted to write a few demos to show this is how you use the software. So I did a couple of simple, straightforward things with lighting and moving the camera around. And I thought, oh, you know what? I should make something that does a drive-through. That would be nice as an example. And you could just use that as basis of some drive-through of some architectural model. And I actually put that aside for a while, and another student was looking through my demos and said, oh, that looked kind of cool. You should finish that. And so I finished that, and they said, oh, this is a good start for a game. We were always playing games at the lab. X-Battle was a favorite for a while, and X-Pilot. And so I said, oh, a tank game, that'd be cool. Let me do something like Battlezone. So I wrote that, and it only took it was like 3 weeks of quick coding, put together a little network game. And it was, at first, unplayable, so we tweaked it, little parameters here and there, and after a couple more weeks, it turned out to be a really fun game. So we played that for months and months, and I did manage to graduate anyway. And then later on, Silicon Graphics had a software contest or a game contest, and I think this was the third time they had the contest. I entered BZ Flag as an entry, rewritten for SGI, which wasn't hard because the graphics library was already based on the SGI library, and that did very well in the contest. And then some years after that, I open sourced it.
Now, did you get noticed by SGI for your job because of submitting BZ Flag?
No.
Unrelated.
I had worked at SGI as an intern for a summer before I went to grad school, actually 2 summers. So it was just kind of going back there.
Oh, so that's how you already knew about the layout of the SGI to be able to change BZ Flag so that it ran on the SGIs? That's
right. And I was also given the opportunity while I was at SGI my second summer there to look at and work on the SGI flight simulator code. And so that's where I learned a lot of the networking that I used later on, the networking APIs that I used in BZ Flag later on.
I remember that flight simulator. I used to play with it during breaks when I was teaching there. It was a lot of fun zipping in and out of things.
Yeah, we used to play all the time at SGI too. Like, I think, every Friday at 5 o'clock, there'd be at least 20 planes in the air.
Did you have anything to do with that? Did you have anything to do with that commercial development, the big flight simulators that was down the street from SGI?
No, I didn't. No.
Oh man, that was such a fun thing. I used to shoot people down all the time, and I must have spent probably $5,000 over the course of 3 or 4 years at that place.
Yeah, I went there a few times myself. A lot of fun. And,
yes, a lot of fun.
I'm told that Synergy is also being used by a company that makes flight simulators for their flight simulators as a way to avoid using a KVM.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, so there's
How-
some
now,
interesting places using it.
Did you abandon BZ Flag, or when did Sean come in to actually play with it?
Yeah, I worked on it for quite a while, and eventually, got a little burned out on it, had enough of it, and there had already been a community kind of building up around it, and I chose one of the developers, asked him if he'd be interested in taking it on, and he did, and did a great job with it. He brought in even more developers, built up the website, and the community really kind of took off. And so I really stepped away from it as far as development went. I would play occasionally and chime in on things sometimes, but mostly I've stepped away from BC Flag, but still enjoy playing it on occasion.
Now, what's it like to have created something of that complexity that then took on a life of its own, so you don't even have to be around anymore to make sure to keep it going? It's just going because people really wanted it.
Yeah, it's really satisfying. I'm always amazed every time I start up BC Flag to play a game, and there's always people playing, and that is also just feels really great that all these people are having such a good time. And this game now is almost 20 years old.
Did you have a similar experience with Synergy? Because it when you couldn't work on it for a while, people were still making patches to it and forking it crazily, I seem, right?
Yeah, I did. I also felt kind of bad that I wasn't still involved in it. I just didn't really have the time. I wanted to work on it, and I kind of felt bad leaving it without having handed it off to somebody to continue it. But it turns out enough people were interested in it that they took it upon themselves to do it, and that's really fantastic. So I thanks to them, I really appreciate it. And
it's also,
and now go ahead.
It's also a true test of the success of open source projects, is that the fact that you can completely just stop working on it and somebody else can take it and keep modifying and even share the results with other people.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the brilliance of the idea? That the software doesn't die when the original author leaves. If it's good stuff, other people will take it up and continue with it. So it's also great to know that you can do that if you come up with a great project. You can't always keep working on it forever. You can get bored of the same project. I mean, I think one of the reasons I left the BZ Flag development was I was just kind of bored of it. I've been doing it for over 10 years, and I'm like, okay, that's enough. I want to do other things.
That's great. And I can imagine that Synergy is just a labor of love for you. You're not actually trying to figure out a professional version of this or make money on it or support it or anything like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. I've been asked a few times by companies about, oh, can we license this or do that, and how much would that be? And I always just say, oh, it's free, take it. And on occasion they like, well, we need this. We can't use the GPL for whatever reason. Our lawyers are complaining, and so I have done a couple of special licenses for companies where they, just to satisfy their lawyers, basically.
And do you own the entire project then? In order to be able to write a special license, you have to actually get permission from everybody that submits for copyright, right?
Yeah, that's right. And these were actually prior to Synergy and Synergy Plus joining back together. So now it would be more difficult. We have multiple copyright holders. Prior to that, it was if you made a patch to Synergy, it was I will take the copyright so that I can do these things. Now it isn't like that, and it would be quite a bit more difficult to do a custom license like that. Now, I think generally also companies have become more familiar with GPL, and the lawyers aren't quite as uptight about it.
Yeah, I could easily see that if someone wanted to take this and commercialize it and add some features, as long as they don't mind releasing their code under the the limits of the GPL, this would actually be something interesting to build on from as a base, right?
Yeah, certainly you could do that. Like one of the things that Synergy has a big problem right now is with the user interface. And I could imagine someone forking and building a nice user interface for that and trying to commercialize that. But since it's under GPL, then the whole community is going to get the user interface for that. So yeah, you always run into that problem with monetizing in the open source world. But you know, with Red Hat, there's always support. You can do support for Synergy. But you know, it's open source. Take it, do what you want.
Cool. Well, we've talked a lot about Synergy and even a little bit about BZ Flag. Is there anything I've left out about Synergy that you want to make sure our audience knows?
Well, one thing that I'm very proud about with Synergy is if you go to Google and you type Synergy, it's the #1 hit. You know, and I think that's great, and that's a testament to how big a community there is of Synergy and how many people have made web pages, blog entries, pointing to Synergy and usually saying how much they like it. And again, sometimes with the complaint of, boy, it needs a better user interface. So again, anybody who knows how to do user interface, please have a look at the project.
Do you have any estimate of the actual usage of this? I mean, are we talking 500, 5,000, 50,000 downloads?
Yeah,
or?
That is a good question. I went back to SourceForge, where it was hosted for quite some time, and looked at the download statistics. And let me see, I had some numbers here. Yeah, it peaked at one point at almost 100,000 downloads in a month. And
wow.
It kept up an average about 60,000 downloads a month for several years.
So it's quite possible that a good portion of our audience is already running Synergy, and this is just a refresher for them.
It might be, yeah.
Very cool. Congratulations, and that's an incredible penetration in the market for something it's so simple, but it's so obvious once you think about what it's doing.
Yeah, I love seeing the reaction of people when they use it for the first time. You explain it to them, and they go, okay, well, I can see how that might be useful. And then they sit down and they use it, and they go, oh my, that is amazing, you know, and that's just very satisfying to see that kind of reaction.
Very cool, very cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Oops. I would be remiss if people will yell at me if I don't do this. Emacs or VI?
VI, but I usually use a graphical text editor.
Yes.
I don't use an IDE, though, if I can avoid it.
Okay, and your favorite scripting language?
Python.
Oh, double hit.
Sorry,
oh, well.
Perl.
We'll just edit this part out of the show.
Synergy's written in C++.
That's fine. That's cool.
Yeah.
So if you know C++, you can help contribute to the Synergy project. Is it all in C++ on all the platforms?
Yes, except limited bits on the Mac where it's Objective-C because of Cocoa requirements.
Absolutely. Okay, very cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Chris, talking about your project, and thanks for enlightening our audience about something they're probably already using.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot. That was, I should have asked Chris how to pronounce his name. Chris, how do you pronounce your last name before we get rid of you there?
Schoeneman.
Okay. I think I mispronounced it at least 2 or 3 times in the intros of the previous shows. So there we go. So that's Chris now telling me that is Chris Schoeneman, who is the creator of the Synergy project, which many of you probably are already using based on the discussion we just had there. So Randy, what do you think of Chris and his project?
Oh, I think it's awesome. Actually, every single person at my office uses Synergy. And I've been using it at home for, don't even know how long, a very long time.
Wow, cool. And in preparation for the show, I actually tried to get it set up with my Mac laptop, and at my desk here at Media Temple, they have a iMac sitting there, and I had problems getting it to run on the iMac. I couldn't get the keyboard to come back, but I think it's something I saw in the release notes that said it's not quite working yet. So maybe somebody can fix that for me and make it all work. And I think it might have also been something to do with the SSH tunneling issue as well, but it doesn't matter because eventually we'll get it working because it's great because I have this iMac just sitting above me, not here where I'm right now, but where I'm at my desk here at Media Temple. And I have to have there's an IBM PC keyboard sitting over to the right and an IBM mouse sitting there that are feeding into the iMac. So it's kind of strange. I have to go over there every once in a while to put something up on the screen there. We have a Twitter feed that we're watching of all the times people mention Media Temple just so I can see if there's any big complaints coming down the line. Anyway, so that's me chatting along. That was a great. I appreciate Chris's energy there and being able to just take on this thing and say, this is what I want to do, and I want to use it for myself. And if other people want to play with it, that's cool too. And it solves problems for people that want to have problems solved. So we have lots of people we've chatted with like that. We also have a lot of people coming up that we're going to chat with like that as well. We've got next week's show, as I'm quickly pulling up my notes here for that. Next week's show, in fact, is Brian Call and Leif Hedstrom. I bumped into both of them at OSCON. They deal with the Apache Traffic Server, which is a high-performance reverse proxy and local service feeds, sort of like Nginx, I think, is probably the closest thing if you haven't heard about Apache Traffic Server. That's actually something that came out of Yahoo that has become part of the Apache project. They're on next week. We've got Adam Armstrong the week after that. Observium, which is a network monitoring software. That's always handy when we have things that look like that. I believe that's what it is. Yeah, it sounds like what it is. Tomás Moraz is going to talk to us about Live Cloud, which is the sort of a universal interface for all the different kinds of cloud interfaces that might be out there. And I know that's a big topic these days. Chris Moore is coming to talk to us about PCBSD. Randy, what's PCBSD? You can give us a short version of that.
It's kind of like a really nice graphical installer on top of FreeBSD. It simplifies FreeBSD for people who, say, don't want to have to know about ports. It's really great for end users. It's really great for developers who don't want to deal with, the whole setup of FreeBSD, because I'll admit the installer is still not really for people who don't want to invest a lot of time.
That's going to be a great show. And Randy, you're back as the co-host on that. Aaron Newcomb's going to sit in the big chair for me because I'm going to be on a cruise. Jonathan Ellis after that is going to talk about Cassandra, one of those great NoSQL solutions, probably the granddaddy of all of them, being used, I think, originated at Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're going to talk to him about that. And then we have a bunch of open slots coming up after that. In fact, almost the entire fourth quarter is open. Within a couple of weeks, I'll be starting to schedule fourth quarter. I got a bunch of new people I've been at OSCON, and they'll be slotted into those slots. And we've got some people that have been on the list for a while, and hopefully they can find a Q4 slot for them. If you want to see that list, you can go to twitch.tv/floss. It is linked directly from there. We have all sorts of people on the upcoming list as well. And also, if you want to find out when we book new guests or want to make suggestions about guests, if you go to the if you want to find out when we have new guests, not make suggestions, you can follow the new Floss Weekly Identica and Twitter handle. That's Floss Weekly, as all one word, FLOSSWEKLY. I'm not going to spell it phonetic like I did last week, but you can follow us. And I try to get both when I book new guests, I post it there, and also as a reminder a few days before the show, I also post who the guest is that week. And also I try to sometimes get a message out about when we're about ready to go live with that. And you can also find out more about where I'm going to be by following my handle, Merlin, M-E-R-L-Y-N, on both Identica and Twitter. This weekend, in fact, I'm going to be in San Francisco attending a Chris Marquardt photo workshop. It's going to be a really clever thing. But we're going to be Thursday night, the day after I'm taping this show, probably about the time you're listening to the show, if you listen to it right away. We're going to be Thursday night at Annabelle's Bar and Bistro downtown San Francisco at 6 p.m. It's a open meet and greet. You can meet Chris Marquardt and me and a bunch of other people that are there for the photo workshop. I'm going to be at Dragon Con from September 1st through 5th. Watch my Twitter handle for possible tweet-ups there. I'll have some time that I'm not actually either in the green room hanging out with really cool people or hanging out on the EFF track there, talking about Hacker 101 and Hacker 201, and also the Lessons Learned from Flossing Weekly. Going to be giving that presentation there again. And I'm going to be in San Francisco again, if you're in the West Coast area there, San Francisco, September 14th through 15th. I'm actually on a cruise from Vancouver to San Diego, and we're stopping there overnight for MacMania 12. I'm teaching on MacMania 12, but we're also going to be stopping in San Francisco. Otherwise, I'm down here mostly in LA these days, and so watch my tweet-ups about, or my Twitter feeds or whatever they are, and my Foursquare check-ins. I'm checking on Foursquare regularly to make sure I get all the points for all the meaningless mayorships and all that sort of thing. So follow me there. Randy, where can we find you?
Well, I am FreeBSD Girl on Twitter, and I will be at Penny Arcade Expo, not this weekend, but next weekend, because I work there.
That's PAX, right?
Yeah. So if you want to find me there, send me a tweet if you're actually going to be at the conference. And when I'm not working, I'll be happy to answer any FreeBSD questions you might have.
Well, that sounds like a great offer, Randy. Thanks again for being the co-host on the show. I always appreciate when you come on and add your area of expertise and all knowledge to the show.
I love being here.
Very good, very good. And I can hear that music coming up, which means what I think it means, which is we're almost done. So, as I say every week, we'll see you again next time on Floss Weekly.